U.S. President Barack Obama speaks at American University to make the case for the Iranian nuclear deal as part of his latest push to convince ambivalent members of Congress to support the agreement. Turkey says a comprehensive battle against the Islamic State will soon be launched by the international coalition using Turkish air bases. And Fox News announces the 10 Republican candidates for U.S. presidency that will participate tomorrow in the first debate in Cleveland, Ohio. And it does include the unexpected frontrunner, Donald Trump. Good evening. You're watching I-24 News. The news today, I'm Yael Wisner-Levy. The clock is ticking rapidly and time is running out until the September 17th deadline for Congress to approve or reject the nuclear deal with Iran. The U.S. President Barack Obama, unsurprisingly, is sparing no effort to garner support for the agreement. In the past 24 hours, he's met with Jewish leaders and just delivered a major speech at the American University in an attempt to get those lawmakers on the fence back on board. Here's I-24 News reporter Eli Hochenberg.
The U.S. Congress review of the nuclear deal with Iran is in full swing. So too is the battle for the hearts and minds of the American people, and it's being conducted without any sentiment. Over 50 years ago, John F. Kennedy came to the American University in Washington to try to persuade Americans to support a nuclear test ban treaty with the Soviet Union. On Wednesday, current U.S. President Barack Obama is at the same location, also on a mission of persuasion, this time to drum up support for the agreement with Iran.
Now, the final criticism, this sort of a catch-all that you may hear, is the notion that there's a better deal to be had, one that relies on vague promises of toughness, and, more recently, the argument that we can apply a broader and indefinite set of sanctions. Those making this argument are either ignorant of Iranian society or they're just not being straight with the American people.
This speech comes only a day after Obama and the leading opponent of the Iran deal, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, went head-to-head once again, both addressing the Jewish community in an attempt to sway Congress to their point of view.
The deal that was supposed to end nuclear proliferation will actually trigger nuclear proliferation. It will trigger an arms race, a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, the most volatile part of the planet. That's a real nightmare.
Obama hosted American Jewish leaders at the White House in a meeting which some participants described as stormy, and during which he warned that Israel would be the one to pay the price if there's no agreement, namely being militarily attacked by Iran's proxy, Hezbollah. In the Israeli security establishment, such horror scenarios are being carefully examined, but opinions are still divided on the basic essence of the agreement with Tehran.
Israel has been dealing with rockets and missiles every year or two, so to relate the Iranian issue to rockets reaching Tel Aviv is misunderstanding Israeli society, and I think it's a mistake. But I also think the policy of the Israeli Prime Minister is wrong. There's no more room to discuss whether it's a good agreement or a bad one. It's signed.
It's the right and maybe even obligation of Obama to protect the agreement he initiated. I think it's a bad agreement, and it's important to acknowledge that even Obama himself admits there's a strong connection between the deal and its consequences and the security of the State of Israel. And this is why it is the responsibility of Netanyahu to try and foil the agreement.
With his opponents working extra hours to foil the deal and the clock ticking rapidly toward the September 17th deadline for Congress to approve or disapprove the agreement, Obama, who will leave this weekend for his 2-week summer vacation in Martha's Vineyard, has no time to spare. According to administration officials, a media blitz will take place in the coming weeks as part of the White House crusade to pressure Congress. It's a fight Obama already made very clear he's not willing to lose.
With me now in studio is a diplomatic correspondent for the News Today, Eli Hochenberg. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. And Ambassador Danny Ayalon, the former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador Ayalon. Many have called this deal, some will call it an historic deal, some will call it a historic mistake. This definitely was a historic speech that we just heard at American University. Obama is taking out every part of his rhetoric tools and trying to convince the unconvinced, and especially speaking to those on Capitol Hill.
Absolutely, and we saw the same thing coming out of Netanyahu last night. So what we see really here is a Herculean effort on both sides, and I have never seen such a direct opposition between Israel and the United States, and more specifically the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of the United States. The President of the United States, I mean, came short of actually accusing of Netanyahu of deceit and deceiving and of dishonesty and everything else. There is no debate on the merit of the agreement, but on the politics around it, and it has become like a duel. Yeah. Between these two gentlemen, which is very bad for America, for Israel, and for the entire region, and also for the agreement itself and its implementation. And
it's clear, of course, we've seen that Netanyahu has been the agreement's fiercest critic, but still the president, the U.S. president, is directing all of his criticism towards Netanyahu and not really talking much about the deal. Why is that? Is it because of these bad relations to begin with, or is Netanyahu really a threat to this deal?
Somewhat, because Netanyahu is the only threat to the agreement. Netanyahu is really the juggernaut. He is the spearhead for the effort, which is really bad. It should have been done much more elegantly, where certainly Israel and certainly the Prime Minister should not be at the front. This is the result when we see such a risk-taking.
And Eli, of course, Netanyahu will be doing everything he can according and with accordance with the lobby groups in Washington to get any of the people on the fence, as we say, back on board. What are you hearing from Congress? What are the people on Congress, the lawmakers, where are they actually trying to get back on board?
Well, first of all, just to continue Mr. Ayalon's saying that Obama said it very clearly. Israel is the only country in the world objecting the Iran deal, and it was indeed a very direct speech. But despite the huge amounts of money and energy invested in foiling the deal from the Jewish lobby, the momentum now is on the side of the Obama team. And there, too, there are great efforts that are being made. We're talking about a tremendous amount of meetings that Obama is holding personally with some lawmakers or cabinet secretaries and other administration officials that are meeting with the lawmakers to convince them, and they want to do it before all of them are going back to their home countries, hometowns for their summer sessions. They want to receive as much support as possible from the Democrats, and it seems that it's bearing fruits, because only yesterday we hear yet another 3 Democratic senators giving their support to Obama. So again, the huge efforts the anti-Iran deal lobby is making doesn't seem, as for now, to be bearing much fruit.
And Obama did speak about the tens of thousands of dollars that's being spent in advertising to convince those that are against the deal. Does Netanyahu even have a chance to win over Congress, or is this a done deal? We're hearing Democrats, abiding by their precedent.
Well, at the moment it seems unlikely, but as Mr. Ayalon and I was talking before the broadcast, Obama wants to pass these issues as smoothly as possible, and that means without using his veto power. This is maybe something it will have to do, but this deal, as it seems for now, will go forward either way, with the veto or without it. And now, again, they're focusing on doing it without the presidential veto.
Absolutely. And Mr. Ayalon, of course, we look at the U.S.-Israeli bilateral relationship. It seems it can't get any lower than this. Should Netanyahu fail in Congress, what does this mean for the bilateral relationship?
Well, I think in either way, whether he fails or in the unlikely event that he does win, it bodes very, very not well for the relationship.
How do you repair such a relationship?
How you do it? Only through a meeting of 2 adults, that is Mr. Netanyahu and President Obama, sitting together with no aides, shouting at each other, cleaning table, and thinking of a pattern, a workable pattern of relationship for the next year and a half. Whether this will happen or not, I don't know. It's too early to say. We're in the midst now of all the emotional battle. But I think there is something here which is being ignored, and that is the real national interest of both countries. This is what is missing, and what should be done now is working on a package, compensation, how to upgrade Israel deterrent and defense capabilities, how to work together a roadmap.
This would appease Netanyahu?
He doesn't want to do it right now because, as the president said...
But September 17th is around the corner,
exactly.
And we're going to have to be practical, right?
Exactly. But it would have been better to kind of have much better atmosphere for these negotiations, for this package deal workout than it is now or after the deal will be done, which will be very bloody, no matter how it ends.
What does this do for Netanyahu politically in Israel and perhaps also worldwide? The Iran issue has been his biggest talking point, of course, throughout all of his administrations. If this does go down on September 17th, he loses this big talking point.
Well, in Israel, so far, politically, he's winning because, first of all, there is no opposition to the deal, and Israelis are very concerned about the deal on the merit of it. Forget the politics. But what it does for Israel internationally, it further isolates it.
Eli, any leader around the world going to hold Netanyahu's hand on September 17th?
I don't think. I think he's pretty much alone. But the thing is that Netanyahu see any discussion over compensations as being surrendered and losing the game. And this is something he's not willing to do, despite the fact that the Obama administration is very much prepared to move forward to discuss the compensation because it's clear that it will happen eventually. But Netanyahu, at the moment, refuses to discuss any of these issues. And as Mr.
By the way, most of the the defense establishment in Israel would have liked to start any talks.
And I think you best described it now as an emotional argument going on right now. Ambassador Ayalon and Eli Hochenberg, thank you both for joining us. Turkey and the United States have reached an understanding on how they plan to move forward with the fight against the Islamic State, with Turkey agreeing to put its own troops on the ground and allow use of its bases. However, other members of the international community have their own reservations. Shai Ben-Ari explains.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry met with Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu Wednesday on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Malaysia. Cavusoglu announced later that a comprehensive battle would soon be launched against the Islamic State terrorist group in northern Syria by coalition forces using Turkish bases. Indeed, the first U.S. airstrike launched from a Turkish base was carried out Wednesday, with the U.S. and Turkey also coming to an understanding over a general strategy to combat IS. Turkey has agreed in principle to use its own troops to clear a section of Syrian territory marked here by the dotted line of IS militants. This will help to cut off the illegal flow of supplies and fighters from Turkey to Raqqa, the de facto Islamic State capital. The Assad regime, meanwhile, rejects the idea of Turkish troops on Syrian soil and has the support of Iran and Russia on this point. Indeed, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov noted there was still disagreement between Russia and the U.S. concerning the strategy to combat IS, ruling out any option of attacks on the Assad regime.
We've underlined that this position is illegal and counterproductive because it is a violation of international law, and in practice it represents an obstacle on the road to forming a united front to fight terrorism, including Islamic State and the Al-Nusra Front.
There is still tension between the U.S. and Turkey as well. The Americans insist they will continue providing air support to the YPG, the Kurdish military force fighting in Syria, despite Turkish objections. But when it comes to the PKK, the Kurdish rebel force inside Turkey, the American tone is quite a different one.
PKK has carried out attacks against Turkey. We have defended Turkey's right to self-defense in this case. We want to see all of that violence end, and we want to see the efforts, Turkey, but also the coalition's efforts, as well as the anti-ISIL groups fighting in northern Syria, focus on combating ISIL.
Once the IS-free zone is secured, the U.S. strategy involves concentrating troops in northern Syria, including Kurds and moderate rebels, for an eventual assault on Raqqa. Turkey itself has refrained so far from committing its own troops to such an effort, and in any case, it is still far off.
With me now in studio is Amir Oren, the defense and government analyst for Haaretz. Amir, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Turkey has long declined to open its bases to the United States and shifted this stance just late last month. What does this show about the deepening relationship, perhaps, between Ankara and Washington?
Yes, in a way, and perhaps it has to do with Erdogan's declining power, relatively speaking, following the elections. But one must remember a few facts. First of all, when you have NATO bases or Air Force bases which belong to a NATO ally such as Turkey, Turkey, the host nation, can either put it at the disposal of the United States or other NATO powers or not. And it happened with Italy some 30 years ago during the Achille Lauro affair, when Sigonella, a NATO base in Sicily, was shut down when US commandos tried to storm an Egyptian plane there. The other point is that there is a difference between what ISIS or Daesh did a year ago and what is happening on the ground now. Usually, when you start with some shock value, such as the German Blitzkrieg in World War II, it's very impressive for a while, and sometimes governments fall, like the French capitulated or the Poles. But then attrition sets in. If you have a strong industrial power like the United States, it grinds the enemy down. And this is what's happening now.
Turkey realizes the threat that ISIS has on its borders and is
That's the third point. That Turkey, in this complicated region, the enemy of my enemy could still be my enemy.
Right.
And Turkey has many enemies in Syria and in Iraq. It has the Kurds, it has the Assad regime, and sometimes it doesn't want to help one because it may help the other. Apparently, a decision has been reached in Ankara that in order to help the United States, help those who are fighting the Islamic State, it must give them the airbase in order for the Americans to cut from the air the supply routes, and for that they must have close air bases, because these are very, very tricky targets.
Right. But what you're describing here is a very short-term solution. They see the threat on their borders, they see what's happening in Syria, but to have a longer-term solution, they're going to probably look for a political solution in the long run, correct?
Well, the long run in the Middle East is a couple of days.
Okay.
First of all, there is a strip of land, some 80 kilometers by 50 kilometers, adjacent to the Turkish border. They want the Islamic State out of there. Later, we'll see, because they have to decide what is their best interest in Damascus.
Right.
Would they want Assad to stay or not? For the time being, the interests of the United States and Turkey converge, and therefore they are fighting together.
But there is a sticking point between Turkey and the United States and the European Union, and that, of course, is the PKK. Turkey's treatment of the PKK. Can that serve as an obstacle in any kind of future cooperation, or is the ISIS threat, a big enough threat that the PKK kind of looks trivial, almost?
The Kurdish topic is, of course, an obstacle. However, the Americans are helping the good Kurds, the Peshmerga, while the bad Kurds, the PKK, is fighting Turkey. However, Turkey knows that if it says no to the United States, Greece is already there offering bases. Of course, they are further away from the scene. It will take more time to fly over. But nevertheless, Turkey cannot play its cards too cockily. It must cooperate with the United States in order to be on its good side.
And in order to stay also as a regional power, as Erdogan would only wish to be.
Yes, and especially now that Iran is re-emerging as a regional power, and Turkey must restart its calculations vis-à-vis Iran.
Amir Oren from Haaretz newspaper, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Israeli authorities are taking the gloves off in their treatment of the militant nationalist Israelis suspected of carrying out terror attacks against Palestinians or non-Jewish places of worship. On Sunday, Israel's inner cabinet approved placing Jewish terror suspects in administrative detention, that is, detention without trial. And yesterday, the first administrative detention orders were handed to 3 suspects. Matthias Inbar and Shai Ben-Ari have more.
Put a name to the phenomenon. Talk of terrorism, not vandalism. Faced with so-called hilltop youth and price tag groups even more determined to do battle not only with their own state, but also with Palestinians, Israeli security forces require additional resources and seem to have obtained them. Administrative arrest, that is, detention without trial, of suspects, and an increased presence in the West Bank. The question now is, what happened before this? A misreading of the facts, says the former head of the Jewish department of the Shin Bet, Israel's domestic intelligence service.
As far as I can remember, I was the first in Israel to talk about terrorism. We have to call a spade, and as I said at the start of the 2000s, don't take anything lightly. It is indeed terrorism. I was attacked on all sides and told it was only graffiti. My answer is no. We know how it starts, we don't know how it will end.
As with any fight against terrorism, human intelligence is paramount. Are there Shin Bet informers in the West Bank's Jewish population? Yes, affirms Menachem Landau, in a roundabout way.
In my time, cooperation between the field and the Shin Bet worked very well. I received information, they called to inform me. That's how it worked. You can imagine that if the police has agents infiltrating the drug scene, then the Shin Bet has them also in the settlements.
But is it enough when facing increasingly violent youth? There may be a few hundred of them at most, a great number of them minors, but they express themselves openly and without any fear.
I did not cooperate during interrogation because I do not cooperate with those who fight against the Jewish people in the land of Israel.
Joining me now in studio is I-24 News military correspondent Shai Ben-Ari. Shai, thank you for joining us. Can we see now the last event, of course, of the weekend, a turning point in the way Israel will see the law and the way the Shin Bet, the Israel Security Service, will treat Jewish terrorists?
For the time being, it's looking that way, that the government is changing its approach to this kind of problem. In the past, groups responsible for what has become known as price tag, acts of vandalism or violence, let's say, in the West Bank and other locations against Arab targets have been characterized as unlawful gatherings, as opposed to actual acts of terrorism. Now, this has all sorts of ramifications for what the government has in its, let's say, store of methods to deal with it, what it can do, how it can combat these effects. When you talk about terrorism, the government can indeed apply all sorts of tactics. Right. For example, administrative detention, a tactic which is most often used against Arab suspects. Recently, the IDF told us there are around 360 Arabs being held under administrative detention. The government council, basically the Attorney General, Yehuda Weinstein, has now authorized administrative detention to be used against 3 Jewish youths, suspects who are already in custody. We do not know exactly how long they will be held. In principle, administrative detention allows the state to hold these people for up to 6 months, and then it can be renewed.
And of course, until the laws actually change, this is a lot of maybe the war of rhetoric, if you will. Netanyahu, for the first time, used the word Jewish terrorist in one of an official speech. What is this doing for him politically?
Politically, this is very complicated for him. It seems that, at least within the upper echelons of the government, and Netanyahu and also the defense minister, they have no problem characterizing these acts as Jewish terrorism. When you talk about their coalition partners, it gets a little more tricky. There is, let's say, traditionally been a lot of objections to the characterization of price tag and vandalism as Jewish terror from the Jewish Home Party and other right-wing sectors of Israeli society. It appears that at least some of the current Israeli government would like to change that.
When can it be changed? What would be the time frame?
I'm not sure that the chances of actually changing the letter of the law are in any way realistic, because the government is dependent on every single member of its coalition supporting it. And I very much doubt that all 61 would be in favor of changing the letter of the law.
Absolutely. A lot of political at least opposition from the right, to say the least. Shai Ben-Ari, thank you for joining us. Palestinian sources say Israel has assured Ramallah that Jerusalem is not holding negotiations of any kind with the Islamist Hamas movement for a 5-year ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Hamas has sent messages through intermediaries that it is willing to agree to a long-term truce. This then raised concerns among Palestinian Authority officials that such a development would have damaging implications on the standing of the Palestinian Authority among the Palestinian public. This, of course, story was broken earlier this morning by the Middle East analyst for Walla and Times of Israel, Avi Sascharov. Avi, of course, thank you for joining us. The story broke this morning. You've been speaking to Palestinian sources that say any kind of truce between Israel and Hamas will be damaging, if not crippling, to the PA.
Well, what I published this morning is that the Israeli government passed kind of a message to the Palestinian Authority that calm down, relax. We're not going to reach any kind of a TADI, a long-term ceasefire agreement with Hamas movement. And that part of an attempt to keep actually Mahmoud Abbas in his office in Ramallah, in the Muqata, before the coming September, because there are all kinds of signs that Abbas is about to do something very dramatic in the coming month. We don't know what exactly does it mean. We don't know if he plans to resign or not, but he's planning something big and dramatic. And I think that this is part of the attempt by the Israeli government, and again, calm down, stay in the office, and let's keep the situation as it is.
Because, of course, on Hamas's part, it's in their interest, and they see it as in their interest to sign a long-term truce with Israel because of course, the war last year. Who else is opposing this besides the Palestinian Authority, the regional neighbors and so forth?
Of course, Egypt is the main opponent for that, and actually it's the main reason for why Israel is not agreeing to
Egypt
the
is pressuring Jerusalem.
Yes, not even pressuring, but saying, well, we're not going to cooperate with this. Now, without an Egyptian cooperation about a Tahrir agreement, about opening the siege of Gaza, it's not going to be realistic, it's not going to work. And this is why, at the end of the day, Israel understands that if it's going to weaken Abbas, if it's going to counter the interests of Egypt, which is the most important ally of the State of Israel in the Middle East today, and it's very important for the State of Israel to keep the ties with Cairo as good as they are right now. This is why they're gonna, I wouldn't say turn against Hamas, but in a way ignore the attempts and the messages that are coming from Hamas, still coming from Hamas, that they are interested and willing to reach a long-term ceasefire.
And of course, internally, this is probably an issue that breaks even more further the ties between Hamas and the PA. Is the PA internally trying to pressure Hamas to back off this kind of, I would say, almost, running after the Israeli authorities?
Well, not really. It doesn't have the ability to say to Hamas, don't do it, or
the political ability, the political
even
power.
the political ability. The only ability that they have is then again to get the messages from the Egyptian and the Israeli government that it's not going to this direction. And no doubt, if there will be a kind of an agreement like that, yes, it might improve the situation in Gaza, but it's going to dramatically weaken the Palestinian Authority.
And when we just take a quick look at the Hamas's power in Gaza now, a year after last year's war, is it in such a weak position that it needs Israel? Or, it can say we're still the strong entity in this region and thus we need Israel, but it won't be a big deal if we're not signing this long-term truce?
Well, it depends on who in Hamas you ask. Meaning, I would say that
Hamas in the West Bank versus the Hamas in Gaza.
No, not necessarily West Bank and Gaza, but inside Gaza, we have the radicals, and we have the more pragmatists, meaning the militants, the armed wing, which is more radical, and they are saying, forget about Israel, let's start a new war against it, let's plan the next war to come, while the more moderates or the more pragmatists will say, we need to find a way to keep the situation as calm as possible, because we're going to lose the next war also, and Israel is not going to change its policy all the time that we're in a war against it. So there's a debate, there's an argument between the different factions inside Hamas, and yet there's no decision taken over there.
And a quick, we were hearing the U.S. President Barack Obama's speech on Iran, a completely different subject, but of course, it has been spoken about with the Secretary of State Kerry about the renewal of Israeli-Palestinian talks. Are the Israelis... we're going to go quickly to another item, but thank you, Avi Yisrael. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have a quick break, and we'll be right back. U.S. President Barack Obama speaks at American University to make the case for the Iran nuclear deal as part of his latest push to convince ambivalent members of Congress to support the agreement. Turkey says a comprehensive battle against the Islamic State will soon be launched by the international coalition using Turkish air bases. And Fox News announces the 10 Republican candidates for U.S. presidency that will be participating tomorrow in the first debate in Cleveland, Ohio. And it does include the unexpected frontrunner, Donald Trump. Welcome back to I-24 News. The U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Malaysia this week to meet with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. His schedule for the meeting is packed, but as Ayman Siksek explains, there's always room for some more disputes and arguments. Let's take a look.
A fully booked schedule for U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry this week as he visits Malaysia for meetings with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Kerry stressed the U.S.'s obligation to increasing security in a potentially volatile region.
So I'm very pleased that we are coming together today on a statement on building a sustainable future for the Mekong. It is a very valuable blueprint for safeguarding the Mekong's fragile ecosystems.
On Wednesday, Kerry met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov for talks on, quote, issues of mutual concern for the two countries. Russia has been trying to forge better ties between Syria and Turkey in hopes of a stronger front against the Islamic State terror group. Kerry had prepared the ground for meeting Lavrov by convening first with Turkey's foreign minister Mevlut Cavusoglu. Turkey ended months of military inaction against the IS last month by launching airstrikes against the group in Iraq. But as Kerry headed to Malaysia to fight terrorism overseas, activists in the US cried out against what they called hypocrisy.
About 2 million people, it's estimated, are actually in slavery or human trafficking in Malaysia right now. So the idea that you would upgrade them from Tier 3 is very troubling to a lot of human rights activists.
Last week, the U.S. upgraded Malaysia to a so-called Tier 2 watch list status as part of a U.S.-led free trade deal with the Southeast Asian nation and 11 other countries. Just last year, the U.S. had downgraded Malaysia following accusations of human trafficking. But as Kerry visits the Southeast Asian country today, last year's bad blood seems to be a thing of the past.
Another tragedy at sea. A boat packed with around 700 migrants from Africa overturned in the Mediterranean Sea just off the Libyan coast, pitching passengers into the water. Italian and Irish naval vessels are still trying to rescue survivors, and the Italian Coast Guard, which is coordinating the rescue operation, said at least 100 people have already been pulled from waters and were currently on board an Irish ship. More than 2,000 migrants and refugees have died so far this year in attempts to reach Europe. In Yemen, fighters loyal to the country's deposed president seized about 10 southern villages from the Houthi forces just a day after capturing the country's biggest airbase. Meanwhile, Yemen's pro-government forces have also retaken most of the strategic province of Laj, once the main southern enclave of Shiite rebels who control the country's capital and much of the north. Yemeni military sources say that the United Arab Emirates had sent in dozens of tanks and heavy artillery pieces to the fighters in recent days. With me now in studio is senior Middle East I-24 news analyst Ali Waqid. Ali, thank you for joining us. Good evening. So we're seeing now, of course, intervention by the UAE and other countries wanting to understand how to solve the Yemen conflict as it intensifies, of course.
I think that this is the first time that an Arab country is involved in a ground operation in Yemen, and this is part of the explanation of the turning point that occurred in this war in Yemen that is lasting since March. Yael, we saw that since March until July, actually, all the airstrikes laid by Saudi Arabia coalition did not succeed to stop the Houthis from progressing towards Aden and taking control over the most important city in the south. They are located in Sana'a, the capital of former North Yemen, and they were about to take control of Aden, the capital of former South Yemen. And this was the moment when the Arab countries decided to go on the ground. Now, we should not forget that in the background there was, of course, the Iranian international agreement, the Iranian-American agreement, and we are seeing that the Iranians are taking a couple of steps backwards in their support to the Houthis, and this also explains the success of the Arab coalition. The fact that Aden airport was taken is allowing the Saudis and the Emirates to bring heavy weapons, heavy machinery, and even tanks, and put them into the service of the loyalists to President Hadi. And in the next hours, maybe the next days, we are seeing the city of Taiz, the third important city, the third biggest city of the country, fallen in the hand of the loyalists of the forces of President Hadi, which will significantly, in my opinion, the beginning of the end of this war.
And will we see any further intensification or at least help support from the UAE?
From the UAE, absolutely. The question is when the Houthis will accept to go to the negotiations table, this time according to the conditions of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the same conditions that they refused a couple of months ago, both in Oman and in Geneva. I think that we are not going to see a breakthrough until the American Congress will decide what is his position vis-a-vis the Iranian deal. Iran is trying to calm the situation. We know that the Saudis are now paying in Syrian money to Iran, and the Iranians are paying in Yemeni money to Saudi Arabia. We saw this rapprochement between the Syrian regime and the Saudis, a scenario that we could not imagine a couple of weeks only ago. And this is why the Iranians are allowing the Houthis to withdraw and their rivals to progress. And this is the division between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Syria for Yemen. This is the equation. But no breakthrough is expected before the Congress decision regarding Iran, or at least before the Arab reaction and the international reaction to the Iranian initiative for the Syrian crisis that is now dealt in Moscow.
Ali Waqid, thank you for joining us, I-24 News senior Middle East analyst. Libya says it will investigate a video which has now gone viral showing the son of the former dictator Muammar Gaddafi being tortured in prison. The video surfaced a week after another son of Gaddafi, Saif, was sentenced to death for his role in the 2011 uprising which removed the Gaddafi clan from power. Uri Shapira has more.
Libya is to investigate the horrific video showing Saadi Gaddafi, the son of the country's former dictator Muammar Gaddafi, being tortured by prison guards. Libya's public prosecutor said he will work to identify the guards and press charges against them. The video, released on social media Sunday, showed 42-year-old Saadi being violently interrogated in Al-Hobda prison in Tripoli. Last week, his brother Saif al-Islam was sentenced to death by a Tripoli court for crimes committed during the 2011 uprising, which ousted the Gaddafis from power. The verdict prompted human rights activists to raise questions about the fairness of the trial and the legitimacy of Libya's justice system.
Human rights staff on the ground have closely monitored the trial and found that their trial standards have failed to be met, including lack of access to prisoners for their lawyers. People have been judged in trial conduct in absentia, which mean they were not present during their trials. There are also claims of ill treatment.
In 2011, Muammar Gaddafi was lynched by angry rebels, and his regime was toppled after 42 years, following the Arab Spring and a long civil war. But in 2014, a new conflict between nationalists and Islamists erupted, and it's threatening to tear the country apart.
Egypt is preparing to inaugurate the new Suez Canal, an $8.5 billion expansion to one of the world's most famous and iconic waterways. The latest refurbishment brings the length of the canal to 193 kilometers and makes it now 24 meters deep, enough to allow the world's largest vessel sail through it. The official ceremony will be taking place tomorrow, which has now been declared a public holiday in Egypt. Joining me now in studio is Ambassador Yitzhak Levanon, the former Israeli ambassador to Egypt. Ambassador, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Suez Canal, besides being a crucial source of revenue for the Egyptians, is also, of course, a symbol of the nationalization of the Suez Canal to the Egyptian people, and, of course, might show a symbol and a significance to the current leader, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
Not only to Sisi, to Egypt in general. You know, this is the pride of Egypt. You see, what happened 149 years ago when Ferdinand de Lesseps digged, the Suez Canal, the famous Suez Canal. It was done by French and British and foreigners, engineers, to dig this one. And it took like several years. This time, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, he asked the engineering corps of the army to make this mission possible, and they did it in 1 year, and it is all made by Egyptians. So there is a kind of a pride that this time the Suez Canal #2, this is, let's say, the fruit of the modern Egypt with Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. When he came into power, he said, look, give me 2 years, because I need 2 years to reestablish the economy and the social problem and the terrorism and the security, whatever. So he took upon himself this giant, let's say, project, and nobody believed him at the beginning. But you see, after 1 year exactly, he's going to inaugurate it tomorrow with the presence of more than 100 people and dignitaries coming from all over the world.
And of course, Nasser was the one that nationalized it. Does Sisi see himself almost as the following in the footsteps of Nasser?
Well, you see, when he came into power, everybody says that he would like to be in the footstep of Nasser. I don't believe that. I think that he's more in the footstep of Sadat than in Nasser. But he was.
But he's trying to bring back the Egyptian pride, trying to bring back.
When he was young, and they have this picture, somewhere, he was presented to Gamal Abdel Nasser when he was a kid, 5 or 6 years, and he still remember, Gamal Abdel Nasser as the leader, the immortal leader of Egypt, and definitely he would like, that the people will see him like Nasser, and this is why the effigies or the pictures of 3 people, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Nasser, and Sadat, will be in the inauguration of tomorrow's Suez Canal. So this is the kind of projection that El-Sisi would like to give to the world and to the Egyptians.
And will it really boost Egypt's economy, or is it more of a symbol, more significant for the morale?
It will boost, it will double, but the expectations are it will be tripled, in a few years. But they would like, to wait and see what are the consequences of digging this new Suez Canal, because they don't have actually, the experience. They sent only 3 big vessels last week, and it went very well. Tomorrow, we will have more people using this waterway, but as soon as, everything will be okay, they will improve it, and they will have more money. They will raise probably, the rates of passing this waterway, and they will have a lot of income, which Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will need it. What they are going to do, and I think they are going to do it immediately the day after, meaning the 7th of October, is to present project of tourism all along the Suez Canal number 2.
And that will definitely bring in a lot of revenue, at least for the short term. Ambassador Yitzhak Lebanon, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, it's still 15 months until the United States goes to the polls to choose a new president, but the candidates are already entering the race, and the first big showdown for the race for the White House takes place tomorrow, when 10 hopefuls for the Republican Party nomination face off in Cleveland, Ohio. Here's this next report from ABC News.
The stage is set. Fox News announcing the top 10 GOP candidates scheduled to face off tomorrow night. Taking center stage, the clear frontrunner Donald Trump, flanked by Scott Walker and Jeb Bush, the only other candidates polling in double digits. Even Bush is now calling Trump the man to beat, while still criticizing his tone.
I respect the guy who's the frontrunner in the Republican nomination, but I think to win and to govern the right way, we have to unite rather than divide.
Joining them on center stage, Marco Rubio, Ben Carson, Mike Huckabee, Ted Cruz, and Rand Paul. The lower their ranking, the further they are from center stage. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, polling at the bottom of the pack at just over 3%, has been placed at the far edge of the stage, along with Ohio Governor John Kasich. Trump's position at the center of Thursday's showdown would have been impossible to forecast when he announced his run just 7 weeks ago. And many predicted Trump's support would plummet after his controversial comments last month on John McCain.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
But the Trump train keeps on rolling. One critical factor, 79% of Republicans say that Trump says what he believes, not just what he wants people to hear.
And before tomorrow's first candidate debate, here's another interesting fact about the 2016 presidential elections. The concentration of political donors responsible for the $380 million that are backing presidential candidates this year is coming from less than 400 families. It's an unprecedented number in the modern era because most of the money is being channeled to groups that can accept unlimited contributions in support of candidates from almost any source, also known as super PACs. Joining me now in studio is the Associate Professor of Political Science at Tel Aviv University, Dr. Udi Zomer. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Zomer.
My pleasure.
Gigantic numbers that are being, funneled. even before the actual campaign has been launched, is outstanding to an outsider of U.S. politics. Is this like an entry membership to even get into this club?
Well, it's even a new phenomenon in the landscape of electoral politics in the United States, and it's a result of two important trends. One thing is the concentration of wealth. The concentration of wealth is not unprecedented, but it's similar to what was the case in the United States around 1929, right before the
Big Depression.
The Great Depression. And the other trend is a series of decisions of the Supreme Court, a very conservative Supreme Court, that deems spending money a matter of freedom of expression under the First Amendment. So starting with Citizens United in 2010, and then a series of other cases, the Supreme Court basically eliminated many of the statutory constraints on how much money can be spent. And the result is that the electoral landscape, at least as far as campaign finance is concerned, is dramatically changed.
Because as an outsider, of course, also looking in, you see, the big families sending in other representatives, if you will, of their families to the candidacies. And you see also the less than 400 families backing these numbers. Just some statistics that I took from Forbes, at least 67 of the people donating are billionaires or at least married to one. This is gigantic gaps in the American society. How is it, trying to convince, or when you're going campaigning, you're speaking to a very, very small number of people, actually?
Well, there's a very there's a large variance here. Okay, so some candidates, such as Ted Cruz, I think this is the extreme case, based on the results from the Federal Election Commissions released in the end of June. 95% of the about $40 million that he was able to collect so far come from donations of larger than $1 million, which means that it's a very, very concentrated number. Same thing with Jeb Bush. He was able to collect around $120 million, but only 3.3% of that comes from the general public that directly donates to him. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton was able to get much more grassroots supports in that sense. But you're right that the campaigning changes, right? So if you look at what the Koch brothers are doing, for instance. So the Koch brothers so far, at least as far as the FEC data shows, are not heavily involved yet in the campaign, but we know that they created a coalition that is going to donate around $900 million in the presidential campaign of 2016. So they create their own primaries. They invite their own candidates. Donald Trump is not there, okay? Candidates who are much closer to them ideologically, and those candidates, when trying to appeal to such coalitions, of course, try to present positions and ideas that would appeal to such donors.
And the bigger question is, as beyond the campaigning, what happens when this person is finally elected in office? We know that big money means you're going to be running in politics. So once you're in office, what does that big money do on the side?
Well, that's a question of corruption, right? So whether if somebody gave you money for those
pressuring to advance certain issues and so forth.
So the argument is that there is enough safety valves in American democracy to make sure
checks and balances.
That this won't be translated into policy decisions on the one hand. On the other hand, I think that the fact that they have this heavy concentration of money in a very small number of hands, and the lifting of any limits by the Supreme Court means that there is a change in the character of American democracy. American democracy and democracy in general has to do with the people, right? With the masses, and the fact that the masses have such little effect, at least as far as campaign finance is concerned, has substantial and fundamental influence on American democracy.
And when we look at the Republican candidates from our point of view in Israel, we look at some heavy donors that are friends also of Netanyahu. Some people like Sheldon Adelson, for example, and perhaps on the other side, Chaim Saban. How much input will they have, or how much whispering in the candidates' ears will they be doing in the next coming months?
Well, at least it seems that as far as certain candidates are concerned, they have the ear, they have the candidate's ear, right? So Sheldon Adelson is known to be close with people like Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz, and Rand Paul may also be a potential candidate who would be very hawkish as far as foreign policy concerning Israel is concerned. So definitely those donors will have at least some of the candidates' ears in the coming weeks and months.
Dr. Udi Zomer, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
The recent capturing and killing of one of Africa's most iconic lions has released an online outcry against the practice of trophy hunting. But the web also remains the main platform in which the trade of hunting goods continues to take place. I-24 News correspondent Shachal Pellet has the story.
The death of Cecil the lion generated a widespread outrage across the world.
but the trial of professional Zimbabwean hunter Theo Bronkhorst, who led American dentist Walter Palmer on the expedition that killed one of the country's best-known and most studied lions, was postponed Wednesday until next month.
What is your feeling about the issue of hunting in Zimbabwe?
It's an integral part of our country, and it's got to continue.
As more images of trophy hunting emerge, such as Sabrina Corgatelli posing with a dead giraffe, a social media backlash has been growing and generating change. A petition signed by over 1 million people had prompted British Airways, Emirates Airlines and a number of American carriers to boycott the shipment of big game trophies and convinced Zimbabwe to ban hunting around its biggest game reserve.
We impose a moratorium or a suspension of all hunting activities in the properties where this crime has been committed.
But the web has also become the main stage for wildlife trafficking, where dismembered parts of lions, rhinos and deer can be bought by the highest bidder. Meanwhile, vandals stepped out of the virtual realm and graffitied their opinion all over Palmer's Minnesota home. Once a legitimate pastime or method of pest control, hunting has grown controversial as the trophy capturing became a trend for the past several decades. According to National Geographic, nearly 1 century ago, an estimated 200,000 lions roamed across Africa. Now there are less than 30,000, and they are considered highly vulnerable. But many hunters believe their practice is not just a hobby, but a mean of conservation as well.
The hunting is not about the killing. I do not hunt in order to kill, but the killing happens in order to have hunted, in order to have the full experience.
The UN General Assembly adopted a resolution to act on illegal hunting, but trophy hunting remains legal in many southern and eastern African countries, where it provides an economic incentive. And so the practice is expected to continue, at least until the very last wildlife animal's head will be mounted on a wall.
We have some breaking news for you now. The Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak has just confirmed that the plane debris that was discovered on Reunion Island earlier this week does belong to the missing Malaysian Airlines flight MH370. This is the breaking news from the last hour. The Malaysian Prime Minister has just confirmed that the debris found on Reunion Island, it was discovered just last week, it does belong to the missing Malaysian Airlines flight MH370. We, of course, will update you with more information as it comes in. I-24 News reporter Uri Shapiro went to take a look at AngelSense, a new GPS device and mobile phone app designed especially for parents of children with special needs to help them track and locate their kids. Here's the story.
We'll see his location in real time.
Doron Sommer is the father of Itamar, an 18-year-old child diagnosed with autism. One of his biggest concerns has been to keep track of his son when he's away from home and prevent dangers arising from his son's special condition and inability to communicate.
We experienced everything, from minor neglect of a nanny and all the way to physical abuse. I was shocked that I couldn't find any solution. There's nothing really out there that is designed for these children.
Doron decided to take this concern into his own hands and with his colleagues created AngelSense, a GPS device attached to the child's clothes that helps the parents to be updated as to where their child is and on some occasions warn of changes in the child's routine. The directors of this initiative also point to another mission, creating a social network for parents of special needs children and breaking the silence and the shame.
If I know that there's a supermarket here which is autism friendly, is nice, like we have here in our neighborhood, where everybody welcome Itamar and wait for him, I want to know about that. So once you have a platform like that with a schedule and location, you can start sharing locations, right?
For those who are not related to this issue, it sounds like a minor problem. But when it comes to special needs children, every small change in routine can be crucial. Last year, America was shocked by the story of Avonte Alquando, a 14-year-old autistic child who disappeared from his school in New York and whose body parts were later found in the East River. Maya Ariel, mother of an autistic child who's working in Angel Dust technical support, gave us more examples of how a small misunderstanding can turn into a tragedy.
He has an amazing smile, so he smiled to the driver of a bus in a bus stop. And the driver smiled to him back and let him board the bus. And they found him in a different city.
According to the American Center of Diseases Control and Prevention, 1 out of every 68 children has been identified with autism spectrum disorder, and the numbers are rapidly growing. Despite intense research into autism, there is so far no cure.
Record imports, the strong dollar, and growing consumer demand helped to widen the U.S. trade deficit by 7.1% in June. Joining me now in studio is Natalie Ehrlich, I-24 News Economy Magazine host. Natalie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So, of course, when we look at the U.S. economy, it has showed some signs of progress. What's really going on here?
All right. Well, it sounds surprising at first because the U.S. economy has shown, as you said, very strong indicators of progress. We've seen better numbers coming from employment and also retail sales. We're seeing a stronger consumer. And so what's actually happening is we're having global weakness here. The consumers abroad are really suffering. And so as the dollar gets stronger, products from the U.S. are just much more expensive for consumers abroad to buy those products. And also because the U.S. Consumer has more money to spend, they're always looking to buy a cheaper product. So they want to get all those products coming from Europe or China. And so this is exactly why we're seeing this big deficit coming up here. And actually, we could expect it to go up even more.
So what will the impact be on economic growth?
Well, I think that what economists are basically saying that we're not going to see a big impact here. This is just modest. They're still expecting 2.3% annualized economic growth for the year. And so this will just have a modest impact because we're seeing such strong economic indicators on the employment front and also retail and manufacturing.
Natalie Ehrlich, I-24 News Economy Magazine host, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Just a reminder now of your breaking news from the past few minutes. Malaysia's Prime Minister has just confirmed that the debris that was found off Reunion Island does belong to the missing Malaysian plane, flight MH370. This debris was found earlier this week, and the Prime Minister has confirmed that this debris does belong to the missing flight. This is perhaps the first sign of the plane since it went lost. We're going to be back after the next news desk headlines. We'll be back. Welcome back to the news today. Tel Aviv is marking the 15th International Animation Festival, Animix. One of the most prominent guests this year is Richard McGuire, whose work has been featured in international publications ranging from The New Yorker to Le Monde. So what's next for the illustrator who once drew up Barack Obama and Sarah Palin in a physical altercation? Ayman Siksak met him today.
So Richard McGuire, welcome to Israel and welcome to the news today. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you.
We started discussing a little bit about your book and the ebook version, which is a very special version, and you'll tell us a little bit about that. And already I'm thinking this really coincides with a lot of what we hear, that print is dead, there's no future in print. As an artist who's made this shift, do you think we were too quick to make that judgment?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, books are just the best medium there is, I think, you know. I mean, this particular book that I'm doing, the story is non-linear, but I think just as any kind of media device, I mean, the reason the book has lasted so long is just because it's perfect, you know. You know, I am definitely interested in other mediums. I love experimenting, and in this particular story, it was nice to do another version of it that is like a new media version.
So there is a real difference with illustrations and also with text, with holding the book in your hand and smelling the book sometimes, feeling it, and looking at a screen. But what freedoms does it allow you, the new format of the ebook, the tablet? What options does it open up for you that haven't been available before?
Well, I have to say, there's not a hierarchy. The one is not better than the other, for sure. And they both have their strengths. But the fact that the book is a nonlinear experience, the ebook, I wanted to take advantage of that. So you can actually, it reshuffles the book and it makes it, the panels are not connected to the background anymore. So you can see a new experience every time.
And there's so many, like you say, so many topics to touch on. What inspires you? What is that thing that makes you want to create?
As far as the comics medium, I went to see a lecture by Art Spiegelman, and he was talking about comics being like, they're just diagrams of storytelling. And that was a really big moment for me to suddenly realize, like, oh, I can tell a story and build it like this with layers of information, the way it would, like a map would work, you know.
Is that what keeps the edge, the thrill of it for you, the new experiments? Because after, you know, appearing on the cover of The New Yorker and Le Monde and so many international publications, is that what keeps you excited about what you do?
I think I'm always trying to put myself in positions where I'm not completely comfortable, and I don't, I have this opportunity now to even do a virtual reality version of the book, which I'm excited about. I like experimenting. I don't know. That's really, I think that's my primary motivation, is probably just always trying to grow as an artist, you know.
So I want to go back to The New Yorker a little bit. You know, there's this famous Seinfeld episode about the New Yorker comics that no one gets, you know, and this is experience, I think, none of the characters, I mean, in Seinfeld.
Right.
No one gets it. And there's this, this is a prevalent maybe notion around for some people. What do you think about it? What's your take on that?
Oh my God. Well, you know, from my personal connection to The New Yorker is not with the comics section. There's no, like, the covers are designed as almost the cover design falls under a completely different world in that magazine, and that's primarily what I concentrate on. You know, I'm not really. I mean, I've done this. This is my first graphic novel. I'm not really a comics person. I feel I'm an honorary member of the comics community. I'm really not a full-fledged member. And I feel, so it's strange for me to be making comments on the comics, because I don't really feel that connected to that. But I don't know. But The New Yorker is an incredible magazine. I'm thrilled to be involved with it, and, you know, just feel lucky to be able to have that as a format.
Are you worried about touching on politics, sometimes controversial issues? Because that also happens a lot with illustrators and artists.
Yeah, it is strange when you're working for, I mean, there is a filter there. You know, you can pitch, that's what I do all the time, is I pitch ideas to them, and then it's yes or no. So it has to jump through the hurdles of their own agenda, so.
Is it sometimes no because it's too controversial?
Yes, absolutely.
So do you believe, I mean, especially I have to ask this because obviously last year, Charlie Hebdo, the terrible attacks. Right. Do you believe there is such a thing as a comic that goes too far?
No, I think everything should be allowed. I'm a firm believer in freedom of speech, obviously, but the Charlie Hebdo attack was really like, I mean, The New Yorker, for instance, wrote me right away and said, come up with an idea for the cover. And I had to digest it first. I didn't know how I felt about that. But I did do a cover for Libe in the French. And I was saying, use a French artist, don't use it. I don't want to do it, because I was a little bit too, and they were like, no, we want you to do it. And I finally felt I came up with a solution. So as an artist, you should just do what you want to do. It's up to others if they want to print it or not. I wouldn't censor myself. Even doing this book, I mean, the original version of this book was a short story that I did in 1989. And then I decided, you know, it was worthy of expanding into a book, you know. And that's one thing that the comic medium does that no other medium can do, is that, I mean, there's something, I've seen, somebody made a short film of the book, and it doesn't work as a film. It really works only as comics, because you can get this simultaneous view. And that's one of comics' biggest strengths is these devices that only that medium can do.
And you know, just before we met, I was reminding myself online of the different covers you created. Is there one, I know this is probably something you get asked a lot, but is there one that's dear to you in a specific way, or you enjoyed working on the most, or has a nice story?
I think maybe the first cover I did for them, I pitched the cover idea before I even had the idea. They said, oh, we're doing a special issue and it's going to be on the newsstands for 2 weeks. So I said, oh, what about an image you can turn upside down and it turns into 2 different images? And so I pitched the idea, and they looked at it and they were like, no, it's not working. And I kept trying and trying and trying, and finally it got in. So to me, that was like the you know, and I had the logo written on both sides, so you can read it either way. So that's my favorite.
And you know, Here has such an interesting history from way back when it was published till now in this new version. Is there, can you imagine what will happen with it next? In another 10 years, another 15 years, is there something that you hope it will happen with it?
Well, who knows what could possibly happen. If virtual reality becomes the new big thing, that could be a really interesting thing, to be in the room, actually in the room, and like walking through the panels and being able to like immerse yourself into each world could be nice.
Well, I'd love to have that experience of finally walking into the room that I've seen in the comics so much. Richard McGuire, thank you so much for speaking with us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
As the saying goes, most young men who go off to war leave their youth on the battlefield. Eligio Ramos, who fought in the U.S. Army in World War II, is no exception. But his youth wasn't the only thing he left behind. He also returned home without his wallet. That, unlike his youth, has not been returned to him. But after 70 years, ABC News has this story.
Eligio Ramos has seen more in his 91 years than many can even imagine, including the bloody battlefields of World War II. He fought with the 250th Field Artillery and helped liberate starving prisoners.
They were coming out of the concentration camps and dying in people's arms, you know, but at least they were free.
But one thing Ramos never expected to see again was the wallet he lost when his battalion took shelter in this Austrian farmhouse back in 1945.
They went through so many little villages and stuff, and he didn't even think about the wallet anymore. They had other problems on their hands, so the wallet was very minimal.
But a letter that arrived in the mail on June 18th suddenly made it significant.
And to my surprise, when I was reading it, and my dad was having breakfast, and I go, look, Dad, I go, they found a wallet. It's for you, you know, and they're looking for you.
The letter came from Dr. Joseph Ruckhofer, whose late grandfather owned the farmhouse in Salzburg where the soldiers stayed. He found the wallet while removing some old wooden planks and then searched online for Ramos based on his old Army ID card.
I was looking for the whole U.S. and I found one with a birth year there in California, and I thought the name was right and the birth year is right, so if he's still alive, I will try my luck and send him a letter.
And now it's back in this hero's hands for the first time in 70 years.
Well, it's never too late to get your wallet back. It's one of the greatest love stories ever, perhaps comparable to Cleopatra and Mark Antony, perhaps even also Romeo and Juliet. But now it may be coming to an end, and in news which has devastated millions around the world, two of the greatest lovers of our age have announced they are splitting up. Shachel Pellet has more.
As if the breakups of Hollywood's Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner or music power couple Gwen Stefani and Gavin Rossdale weren't enough, now comes the greatest split of all.
Kermit! What a pleasant surprise to see you and whoever you are.
Yes, Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog are calling it quits. After being married for over 3 decades, at least according to the missus, the pop culture duo have announced in a joint statement that it's over. We will be seeing other people, pigs and frogs, confirmed Miss Piggy on her Twitter. The suspicious end to this great romance has prompted speculation that it is nothing more than a publicity stunt on behalf of ABC as it prepares to launch a new Muppet show this fall.
ABC wants to put on an all-new primetime series starring the Muppets.
God bless America and its magnificent broadcasting company.
Fortunately, those heartbroken by the historic split will be relieved to learn Kermit and Piggy will still be working together. The new series, a sort of more ironic meta-take produced in the style of The Office, but loyal to its origins, is aimed at being exactly the same and completely different, according to executive producer Bill Prady. And since Kermit is expected to produce Piggy's upcoming late-night talk show, tensions are sure to flare up. When asked in a recent panel whether there was any hope of a reconciliation with Miss Piggy, Kermit said, "I don't know. People change, so do frogs and pigs. Chances are slim, though, as he already has a new girlfriend, a pig named Denise."
What can I say, Gonzo? I'm attracted to pigs.
Still, the die-hard fans might still find hope at the end of the tunnel. The world can now nail-bitingly follow the former lovers' relationship to see how it unfolds. Will their new fame keep them apart in the great tradition of frog meets pig, pig loses frog, or whether, this ultimately being a Hollywood romance, there will be a happy ending after all?
An important question that we, of course, will update you on whether the two do stay together. With me now, though, is Jonathan Regev, I-24 News sports anchor. Jonathan, thank you for joining us. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, El.
So there's a new doping scandal going on in the world of athletics.
Yes, doping scandals in the world of athletics and cycling. It's an ongoing business, but a new report, which was kept quiet by the IAAF, the world's governing athletics body, it has been leaked out by German and British journalists, and it unveils the fact that more than 30%, about a third of the medals won in world championships and in the Olympics are won by athletes who are suspected of doping, which means that basically everything, not everything, but a lot
You're learning childhood memories right here.
Pretty much. that is exactly the case. And this report has been kept quiet by the IAAF until some whistleblower said, enough. These people know that so much of the sports we see, it's tarnished, it's false, but we're being lied to.
Right.
Basically, we're being manipulated.
And world records and so forth have been made under the
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Now, the athletics world championships are at the end of the month. In China, the Olympics are just a year away. In Brazil, who are the people participating there? 2 years ago in Russia, some of the biggest names in the sport, Asafa Powell and Tyson Gay, they were out of the games. Who will be out this time? We don't know, but obviously there's a lot of monkey business going there. Doesn't look good.
And of course, other maybe more positive day today is taking place in South America, Latin America. The biggest prize in club football.
Absolutely. The Copa Libertadores, it's the South American version of the Champions League, the biggest trophy there is in club football. And tonight, the second leg of the final, the trophy will be given tonight. River Plate, the big Argentine club, will be hosting Tigres from Mexico. The first leg was held in Mexico last week. No goals were scored there, which means River Plate only have to win their home game. They're seen as favorites, one of the biggest clubs in South America, but they have not won the Copa Libertadores for nearly 20 years. On the other hand, no Mexican club ever won this. Mexican clubs only joined less than 20 years ago. So will Tigres make history tonight?
Well, we're going to have our eyes peeled. And
absolutely.
Just quickly, you know, the horrible almost shark attack, or the actual shark attack that took place just only 2 weeks ago, shocked people around the world. But now you're giving us a lagoon that's shark-free.
Yes, you don't want to meet sharks when you go surfing. Go surfing in Wales, the world's first lagoon.
Look at that.
Yes, and it's the waves are beautiful, so say the people who have surfed there. It looks great. No sharks whatsoever. You can go surf there.
Jonathan Regev, thank you, of course, for joining us. That's it for tonight. You can, of course, watch us all the time on our website, i24news.tv. Find us on Facebook. Look out for us on Twitter. Then I-24 News Desk is next. I'm Yael Wisner-Levy. That's it from the Jaffa Port.